history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes in a lot of ways.
But it's interesting, and we've got to get a good Ridley Scott reference in there when you talk to Roman history.
If you are not educating your public, if you are not teaching, you're going to be left behind as a brand, because the modern consumer is really smart.
Hello, and welcome to the Liberty Spenders Podcast. We are Kurt and Kristen Ludhart, your hosts and co-founders of the Prosper Group, an agency that's helped raise over $500 million and helped elect over 100 members of Congress, 15 governors, 15 U.S. senators, and 1 president. And now, in addition to helping political candidates get elected, we're helping your business get elected by answering this question. What if you could exponentially grow your business by tapping into a lucrative and engaged audience that we call Liberty Spenders? Now, they make up 76.5 million of faith-based and politically conservative consumers, and they're looking to buy from businesses and brands that align with their values. If you want to learn more about that, you can get access to our new best-selling book at libertyspenders.com/free.
And our guest today is Jeremy Ryan Slate, and he is the host of the aforementioned Jeremy Ryan Slate Show, where he dives into the minds of top performers to uncover the secrets of success and challenge mainstream narratives. He studied literature at Oxford University and earned a master's in early Roman Empire propaganda from Seton Hall, which we're going to have some fun talking about today. His podcast was named the #1 podcast to listen to by Inc. magazine in 2019 and top 40 under 40 by Podcast Magazine in 22. Together with his wife, Brielle, Jeremy co-founded Command Your Brand, a leading PR agency that helps entrepreneurs amplify their message through strategic podcast guesting. He's based in Stillwater, New Jersey. He raises chickens. He raised chickens. Okay, we're going to get into that before that maybe. And it was a competitive power lifter and brings a lot of grit and insight to everything he does. Jeremy, thank you for joining.
Hey, thank you for having me, guys. I just had a really great Father's Day not long ago where my daughters bought me another 10 chickens to add to all my chickens. So, of course, I'm a happy guy. Like I said, I've been away for a little bit, so I've had my father-in-law watching all my chickens. Didn't go as well as I'd like, as I went down from 22 chickens to 12. But those 12 girls are still getting me 9 eggs a day, so I can't complain.
Yeah.
Now, are the kids old enough to help take care of the chickens, or is this really like dad duty?
It's still semi-dad duty. I have a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 1-year-old.
Ooh,
the 6-year-old is at the point now where she wants to go out and get the eggs, which is great. It's really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, it's a lot of dad handling the pig and the chickens and all that other jazz in the morning.
Well, I'm always afraid to get into this too much because Kurt has it in his head that we're going to be homesteaders and we're going to get chickens. And anytime we talk to somebody who even dabbles in any of this, and we know several people who have chickens, he's like, Kristen, we can do this.
Yeah.
And I have to remind him that
one of our former guests secretly raises chickens inside of LA. Like,
yeah, don't out him. He's going to get in trouble.
Well, I'll tell you what, Kurt, the mustache is the gateway drug. Yeah. You get a mustache, next thing you know, you're raising chickens, man, and there is no returning.
Jeremy, I'm going to stop this podcast right here, right now. If you keep this.
Yeah. Well, we hail from Indiana, which is one of the largest egg producing states. And and this weekend I was driving through southern Indiana back home to Indianapolis, and in the south part of Indiana is where a lot of these egg farms are. And PETA is running a campaign, I kid you not, trying to convince farmers that the words were, the vegan trend is real. Get out of egg farming before it's too late, and don't be like these other kind of folks who produce other things. And I thought that was interesting. They're trying to get the big egg people out of the business. So who knows? They might be.
I don't know. Growing up, my dad always told me PETA stood for people eating tasty animals. So I don't know.
Yeah, so we may all need to grow our eggs, or we may need to get our eggs from chickens, right?
Yeah, grow our eggs.
Grow our eggs is wrong.
Yeah.
Grow our own food. It was the angle I was going for there. And I grew up on a farm. I will talk about it like I'm going to do it, but I also know what it takes to do this stuff. And so I used to get up at 6 a.m. and go out in the winter and bottle feed our dairy beef feeders. And I don't know that I really want to do that now.
Yeah, I don't have that level of experience. Like I said, I just have a 150-pound pig that gets kind of angry and tries to eat your feet if you're not going to feed him fast enough. Right now, we're raising another 10 chickens in the basement, which I'm trying to keep the cat from eating. And we have 12 more out in the barn.
Yeah. Well, we probably cheated here because one of the last questions is, what is a passion project that you're on? And now you've used up your chicken.
Oh no! Something tells me he's got more in there.
Oh no! My wife has videos of me at Tractor Supply the other day, like a giddy schoolboy getting to pick out my chickens. So I can't say much.
Yeah. Well, I like it when people do a lot of different things, and of course, I know you as the host of the Jeremy Ryan Slate Show, and you're also somebody who helps people understand how to best use podcasts. What inspired you to start the show and create the platform and do all that?
Honestly, I've been a big fan of podcasts for a really long time. I've listened to, and I'm trying to think how many years it's been now. I think they've been going for 17 years at this point in time, but Adam Curry is actually
new?
No, podcast has been going since like 2004. But there's Adam Curry is actually he was on MTV in the 80s, and he's what's called the Podfather. He's the guy that actually invented the technology behind podcasts. And I listened to his early podcast, which was called The Daily Source Code. It was basically a podcast on how to understand the technology behind podcasting. But his show that I've been listening to for a good, I think, 16 or 17 years now since it started is called The No Agenda Show. And he and John Dvorak actually play news clips, but they do it like a morning show. So it's like a morning zoo where they have jingles and sound clips. And it's a hilarious show to listen to the most depressing news while you're watching it. So it's like, it kind of makes your life feel like it's a little less scary. So I've listened to that show for a really long time. I'm also a massive Yankees fan. So I have 5 different Yankees podcasts I listen to. I've been a really big podcast fan for a really long time. And also a lot of the shows were early audiobooks. So you could listen to things like A Tale of Two Cities and all these different things. So for me, my background was I was a teacher for a couple of years. I got burnt out really fast. And I went through a number of different businesses, personal training, life insurance. And I was just working at a friend's marketing agency. This is back in 2013. And I started a podcast as a hobby. I didn't expect it to take off, but had 10,000 listens in my first month, being absolutely nobody with no social presence. And that's how I went from being somebody that was a fan to being somebody that's been in the space now for well over a decade.
Yeah. Well, as somebody who has a podcast, I know how hard it is to get to 10,000 listens in your first month. Most podcasters, don't get anywhere near that, let alone, in their first month, let alone, in 12 months, right? Yeah.
Well, your average, you're in the top 5% of all podcasts in the world if you get more than 100 listens an episode, because that's 95% of the almost 4 million shows out there. There's really nobody listening. It's the top 5%. It's very top heavy in terms of the podcasts out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so what were you talking about then on your show, and how did it evolve to the topics you're kind of getting into today?
So I guess when you look at it, Kurt, it started honestly with me looking at who do I want to learn from. And at that point in time, I was reading a lot of business books. I hadn't really started to run a business yet. So I was wanting to learn from business authors and athletes. So that's a lot of who I was talking to early on. And as I've grown and as my interests have changed and as my business has grown, frankly, what I've talked about has changed radically. I've always been somebody that's been very political. I grassroots campaigned for Ron Paul twice. And I've always been somebody that's been, I don't know, conservative, but kooky conservative, if that makes sense. We're kind of a little weird over here. We don't like the Federal Reserve. We don't like taxes or any of those sort of things. But I wouldn't say I'm an anarchist. I'm definitely more conservative than anything. So when 2020 happened and everything got really weird, to me it felt like the right time to talk about some different things, right? So I had a lot more bigger political voices on. Like we had Dinesh D'Souza on the show. We had Jack Posobiec on the show. And I wanted to have conversations that I felt like people needed to have in that period of time. And as once again, I've grown more, what I've talked about has changed again, right? Like we're still covering some political topics. We had a fun discussion with an architect about 9/11 a few months ago, which was interesting. But right now I'm talking about historical topics I think we can learn from that are kind of more, I guess, older politics, if that makes sense. So I did a interesting episode about Cesare Borgia, which is the character that inspired Machiavelli's The Prince. We just did a episode about the downfall of Napoleon, which I think is super interesting. An episode about William Wallace. So I'm really trying to cover a lot of things like that. And I'll be honest with you, it's because getting back to what I went to school for, being the Roman Empire, it's made me more interested in history again. Because I do think there's a lot of lessons we can learn from those things because we just make the same mistakes again and again.
Oh, we do. History repeats itself.
Absolutely. And I think we constantly try to convince ourselves that we're some kind of new human and we don't, we've evolved in some way. So we're not going to have the same problems or issues that we had previously. But that's just never really the case. It may take a slightly different flavor, but what the Romans dealt with, what the Greeks dealt with, are all the same kind of things we deal with today.
It definitely is. And frankly, one of the big things I've observed is, with the Trump election and with even the charges that were happening last year, a lot of people were talking about the fall of the Roman Republic. Mm-hmm. And I think, frankly, and this is kind of one of the reasons I've got to talk about the Roman Empire so much, I think that happened a really long time ago. Mm-hmm. I think though we are a constitutional republic in the way that we're put together, we haven't functioned as one for a very long time. And I think if you want to look at 1913, that's a really big part of that, right? Because there's three things that happen in the year 1913. The first being that the Federal Reserve Act passes over Christmas break. You also have the Income Tax Amendment passes. And then something that nobody seems to talk about anymore, and I really don't know why, which is the 17th Amendment passes as well. Now, the reason that they wanted to do something about it makes sense to me, right? People were taking their friends and relatives and trying to give them a job as a senator. But at the same time, it made it so state legislatures don't have any representation. And especially in times like 2020, that would have been extremely valuable to us. So to me, especially looking at the FDR presidency after that, we haven't been a functional republic in a really long time. We've operated, frankly, more like an empire. And that's why even when I looked at the Roman Empire, that's to me made more sense about really where we are. And that's been a lot of what I've been talking about, because I think that is more of a roadmap of where we are and what we can learn from.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Kristen, our favorite political science professor in college, Dr. Martin, would love this.
I know.
God rest his soul.
I know.
He would talk about 1913 and the end of direct elections or the start of direct elections of the U.S. senator, as opposed to the state legislatures, and how that ended federalism, and in the income tax, which was never supposed to be more than 2% now, mm-hmm. And absolutely, he would love.
I know
he would love this, and those are big pivotal points, like you said, that very few people point to.
Well, and it's because people also want to talk about, is Donald Trump Julius Caesar? That's the big thing they like to say, right? Like, is Trump Caesar? Or is he some other maniacal historical figure that they try to compare them to? And I think, frankly, a lot of historians have tried to do this. I think it's more of a scare tactic than anything. It's something they think is going to get them views and something they think is going to get them attention. When if you look at functionally how the country has been, we're operating a lot more like late stage Rome's 3rd century crisis. And mm-hmm. in the 3rd century, there's a few things that are really bad. And you can let me know, guys, if any of this stuff sounds familiar to you. By 284 AD, they're at 15,000% inflation.
Oh wow!
They're making the military so large that it's driving inflation. And another problem that they're having is, well, they've lost identity as Romans because now they have this immigration crisis. Once mm-hmm. again, not like we have one of those happening. But, to me, the 3rd century is much more of an indicator of where we're at and how we're doing.
It's fascinating. And it's a great sort of inflection of your what you studied in school. Now I want to drill down on that a little bit. We're going to put a little pin in because I want to come back to podcasting.
Well, Kurt here is history and political science double major. So we both love history, but he absolutely, he can't read enough about it. He's constantly going through something as he does his reading. And so
I recently read Julius Caesar's own history of his battles, and I found that fascinating. He was actually not a bad writer. That being said, if you're seeing those parallels, what happens next?
Well, I think the big thing you have to think about, Kurt, is like history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes in a lot of ways, right? I think people want to look at kind of, I don't know if you guys remember this, in the 80s, there was that map at the mall, and it was like, you are here. And I think that's how people want history to be, right? Like, all right, I'm here, in 5 years we'll be here, and we're going to cross the Rubicon here. And it's really not like that. But there's a lot of similarities in how the effects we're living with are caused. And I think that's the thing you have to consider. And when you look at Rome, in 117 AD under Emperor Trajan, it's at the largest size it's ever going to be. After that time, it's only going to continue to get smaller over time. And during that time period, you have a lot of wealth, and Trajan is what is known as one of the 5 good emperors. Now, the 5 good emperors are really interesting because you get kind of a mixed bag in the first kind of 100 years or so of emperors. And the reason being is they would pick either their natural born son or whoever lived long enough, right? That was kind of whoever would be the next emperor. So in that mixed bag, you get Caligula, who's your 3rd emperor. You get Nero, which isn't too far after that. You get Domitian, which is a little crazy. So it's really a mixed bag of what you're getting. So in 98, there's this emperor named Nerva, and he's a really old guy when he gets that job. He's a senator that gets that job because they had just lived through a civil war. They're trying to figure out, well, what do we do? So they pick Nerva because he's like, all right, well, he's old. He's going to die anyway, but at least it's some stability.
Right.
The thing that Nerva does that's different.
There's a parallel there, by the way.
Stop. I know.
Not the parallel you think, by the way.
The minute he said that, I'm like, don't go there.
He does the right thing, not the wrong thing. Like if it was Emperor Biden, we'd be in a lot more trouble. But the thing that Nerva does is he's the first of what's called the 5 good emperors. And it doesn't mean that they were good guys. What it means is that the rule was very stable during that time, and the empire was very stable, and there was good growth and not a lot of chaos. Because what would happen is every few emperors, you would get a civil war because they didn't know what to do about who the next person on the throne was going to be. So what Nerva does, and part of the problem here as well, is a lot of these 5 good emperors didn't have natural born sons, right? So you have to consider that when looking at this. What they did, and it starts with Nerva, is they take the closest person related to them that is qualified for a political position, right? So they're basically like, you look like you're best qualified to rule an empire, you're going to be the next emperor. So you get Nerva, you get Trajan, you get Hadrian, you get Antoninus Pius, you get Marcus Aurelius. You get 5 really good emperors during this time period. And Marcus Aurelius changes this entire thing. Everybody's like, he's this great stoic, he's so wise. PragerU did a really interesting video about him if you get a chance to see. Like, the guy was likely a nervous Nelly and wasn't really actually doing a lot of the things he was writing about. If you ever get a chance to check out the PragerU video, it's really, really funny about Marcus Aurelius. It's a kid's video. But anyway, so the thing
Prager, they do a good job.
Yeah. So the thing he does that's different is he says, okay, so I know for the last 5 emperors, including myself, we've said, you're most qualified for the job. You're going to get the job. I've got this kid, and I know he's really spoiled, and he's one day going to be in a Ridley Scott movie, and his name is Commodus. And the thing that's different about Commodus is he has the title of Caesar. So when you were a Roman emperor, Augustus was kind of the big emperor, but there would always be like the next person to be emperor, and he would get the title Caesar. And he's named Caesar at 13. So he's kind of thought he's a big deal for a really long time. He's been spoiled. He hasn't really had to fight in the army. He gets to play in gladiatorial games. So he's very spoiled and doesn't have kind of the right abilities to rule an empire. And if you read Edward Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, he's actually going to blame Commodus specifically for the fall of the Roman Empire. It's kind of this long downslide after Commodus. So Marcus Aurelius dies in 180. Commodus is going to rule from 180 to 192. In 192, it's what's called the year of the 5 emperors, right? And I'll stop being so granular in a second, but this is a really important kind of parallel to understand where we're at. And in the year of 5 emperors, you have Commodus as the first one, and then all these other ones that try to make it go right and can't live long enough to be emperor. Now, the thing that changes is this is where the Roman military-industrial complex comes in. Because now what happens is you basically have the most powerful military commander being the person ruling Rome, right? So it'd be like if Raytheon was president. In some ways, they get to, in some ways they get to be president. I don't know. But this is what ends up happening in the 3rd century is if you had the most power and the biggest army, you could be emperor. Because what would happen is the army would say, well, my general, he's emperor. And they dress him in purple and they would defeat anybody else that was an emperor claimant because they enlarge the military because bigger military, you can be emperor. And to pay the military, you need money. So what do? Inflation. They start clipping pieces of coins. They start mixing in other base metals. So by 284 AD, you're at 15,000% inflation. And 10 years earlier than that, in the 270s, you have a silver coin that is 97% bronze. So this is the real problem we're dealing with, is this massive inflationary problem. Now, if your power comes from having a big military, what else do you need? More soldiers. So they start to bring in more barbarians to fight in the Roman army. So now they don't identify as Roman. They identify by whoever has the most money and can pay them. So you're going to even see a lot of the barbarian tribes that attack Rome were actually formerly a Roman commander, and they go back to being a barbarian commander. Or they might switch loyalties again. So you have these two massive problems of inflation and immigration. And if you look at it, one hand washes the other, right? Immigration is going to make an inflationary problem worse, especially when you have social programs people are benefiting from. And if you don't have a border, you don't have a country. And if you don't have a currency, you don't have a country. Because once that currency has no value, well, the people there have no loyalty to it. So when I look at the 3rd century, that's the thing that terrifies me the most for where America's at right now.
And we've got to get a good Ridley Scott reference in there when you talk Roman history. Which is, by the way, one of the best movies ever, Gladiator. Although I don't know how historically accurate, but we'll.
Oh, it's not historically accurate at all, but it's fun.
I was gonna say probably
that and Braveheart, right? The 2 least most historically accurate historical epics. But I do think I like your idea. History rhymes, not necessarily repeats. I have come to appreciate the effect of generational cycles on how our world operates and what's going on. I've read the great book, The Fourth Turning, which would say a lot of the same things that you're saying about how history rhymes and repeats, and it repeats in these, what they call them, seculums, about 100-year cycles as generations move through. And so you can see parallels. And I think the mistake most people make is they just think history doesn't apply anymore. You can't look at Roman history. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have cell phones. They were, they were primitives and stupid, and we're much smarter now. And so all the problems that they had, we're now smarter than that, right? We're not stupid enough to have our country fall prey to civil war or, massive inflationary attacks. Don't we have the Federal Reserve to solve these problems? And in the end, so much of what happens is it's essentially a repeat or a rhyme of the same stuff we did, 100, 200 years ago, because we're just, as humans, we almost react like Pavlov's dog to the same stimuli, every couple of generations.
Well, I think as well, the thing to consider, though, I think when people look at history, oftentimes they look at doom, right? Are we doomed? Are we in trouble? Are we ruined? And I think the thing you have to consider is history is a great example of what can we do about it, right? And I think that's what's really important, because the thing that nobody really talks about, at least in the modern world, right? It would have been talked about much more, throughout the Renaissance and the Middle Ages and things like that, but it hasn't been really discussed in our modern world all that much. And when you look at Rome, what we traditionally call the Roman Empire is the Western Roman Empire. but there's also an Eastern Roman Empire because the empire was huge. And the Greek-speaking side of it, though most emperors actually would have spoken Greek because it was easier to speak than Latin, the Greek-speaking side with Constantine starts this gradual process of becoming its own empire, right? An Eastern Roman Empire. And you're not going to have a full split until after the rule of Theodosius in 380. But what really ends up happening is the Eastern Roman Empire operates a lot differently. And when people look at Constantine, very often they talk about Constantine for being the first Christian to be emperor, which is true. But he doesn't make it a Christian empire until Theodosius in the 380s. But the thing that he does that's different, and this is going to be one of the major reasons that the Eastern Empire lasts 1,000 years more than the Western Empire, is he handles his monetary system. He handles the inflationary problem. So in 314 AD, in a city called Trier in Germany, he mints less than 100 gold coins. And he's going to do this every single year until he dies in 336 AD. And I think this is really important to understand because I know Ron Paul has talked about for years that if we ever did go over to a gold standard, whoever actually did it wouldn't be that popular, right? Because it might fix things in the future, but it's going to make things really painful right now when you're as far over your skis as we are. Once again, I don't know if this is intentional or just kind of the way it happened. Like, was he just making as many gold coins as the amount of money he had at that time? But Constantine does this every year until he dies in 336. So by that point in time, they're on a gold standard. Now, people might say, couldn't they have just done that previously? Well, there was a very well circulated gold coin, but here's the problem is people would get those gold coins and hoard them. So what Constantine actually does is he requires all taxes to be paid in gold. So now you're getting gold into circulation. And there's a lot of other policies around how gold circulated that he put in as well. But a gold standard was one of the major reasons the Eastern Roman Empire that we've come to call the Byzantine Empire survived, was because it had a strong currency. And when you look at where America is at now, I think the two major things that we can fix that puts us in a much better condition is, first of all, our borders, but second of all, our currency is a really big problem. And the thing you have to consider, and this is why I actually really liked the tariff conversation earlier in the year, is if we don't fix industry at home, our currency, if we do something about it, is going to die, because you have to consider how much of our currency is based off of oil. So in America, we have to have an economy, and we don't really have anything more than, a service economy. We don't produce anything here anymore. We don't do a lot of these things here anymore. And if you look at what the tariffs did, you have auto manufacturers coming back to America. You have different other technology manufacturers coming back to America. And that actually gives us the ability to do something about our currency because we have an economy that produces something.
Hey, business owners, did you know there's 76.5 million faith-based and conservative consumers that are looking to support brands that align with their values?
That's a $5 trillion opportunity, and if you're not tapping into it, you're leaving money on the table. Our new book, Liberty Spenders, is your ultimate guide to reaching this influential audience using conviction-driven marketing.
That's right. We break down real-world strategies that successful brands are using right now to connect with this audience authentically, build trust, and drive long-term business growth.
So if you're truly serious about standing out in today's crowded market, grab your copy today on Amazon or visit libertyspenders.com. And don't miss out on this revolutionary strategy called conviction-driven marketing. We just had an episode come out just before the 4th of July with a gentleman who runs a website called madeinusa.com. And he makes the same point, not so much about currency, but about the fact that if we could reinvest in our own economy, I said, even if all we did was the government promised to buy from American-only manufacturers, we would see a resurgence in American manufacturing, and it would come back in the favor to the government in the form of more jobs for American factory workers and more taxes, but it's short-term pain. I've also talked to a lot of business owners who built an entire supply chain in China, over the last decade, and now they're in trouble. And so it's not something that you can, we make a quick solution, everything starts settling quickly.
Well, not to mention technology and robots and just the shift of how are these manufacturing plants even working? How many people are still going to be involved in doing the things over time?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's powerful. And every time I listen to one of your episodes, and now as I've been in the middle of one, I want to pull back out my Roman history. I did make an attempt, but did not complete Edward Gibbon's history of the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. Now
it's 7 volumes, man, and everyone's as big as Atlas Shrugged. What do you expect?
Yes.
He sets a high bar.
Yes. But I do think I got to it's all communist fault part of it.
Well, that's in the first volume in the first 100 pages.
Yeah, there we
go. Because he starts out in the time of the Antonines, which is actually about Commodus's family.
Oh.
Well, there you go. Well, I feel like I got more than 100 pages in, but maybe not. We'll see. I think this is such an interesting topic with so many parallels that we have right now. And I just think, we've got to do a good job of paying attention to and learning from our past.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, because, like I said earlier, Kurt, yes, there's problems, but there's also solutions, right? There's been solutions throughout history. And I think if we're looking for those different things, which it's funny because the content I do on my regular channel and show has changed a lot. I've been doing more historical things. Like last week, our episode was on the Great Fire of London. So it's I think there's so many things we can learn from these different topics if we choose to, right? Or we can just go on and make the same mistakes and kind of be glib about our history.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's the right word choice too, glib.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the things, for a really stark change of topic, almost, one of the things I really wanted to do, because a lot of our audience are business owners of all types, and they need to understand more. I have found having a podcast, even though our podcast is we're no Joe Rogan experience here, right? We're much, much smaller. But even us having our podcast has been great for our business. And I know that's part of your area of expertise, is helping business owners take advantage of that. And so while we've gotten into Roman history, we talked a little bit about how your podcast got where you are and how you started. I really want to dial in a little bit. I know it's one of the topics in your book. How do you make use of podcasting for a business?
Well, I think honestly, for most businesses and for most brands, it doesn't make sense to have your own podcast just because there's a lot that goes into it and there's the management of it and everything else. I think, frankly, being a guest for most brands is the thing that makes the most sense for them. And the thing you want to consider is, what is the single thing I can be known for? Because I think when people look at podcasts, they think it's a marketing action. Okay, I go on this number of shows, I get this number of leads, whatever it might be. But frankly, and this is the reason we call our company a podcast public relations agency, is it's really a PR action, because you're getting people to know you, like you, and trust you. And sure, you're going to generate some people that want to do business with you. I would hope so. But the biggest thing I would say is you're becoming known for something and you're becoming the name in something. So when you look at what you do, you want to see what is unique or what is particular, what is special about what I do, and what can I teach on that, right? Like, how can I get somebody to listen to an episode I just did and apply what I just talked about? And frankly, I could even talk about this in my personal brand. Is I've been doing this for a long time, and I've been able to jump in the last year from doing kind of smaller podcasts to, I've been on some of the biggest podcasts in the country because I found a very unique thing that matched up with the news cycle, and that was talking about the Roman Empire. Now, the challenge for me has been, well, how can I now take this thing that I have knowledge in and is also in the news cycle and marry it to what I'm currently doing? So when you look at what we've ended up talking about, we've talked about commanding your empire, right? Because as a business owner, you're creating a business empire. So we've, in our marketing and the way we talk about things and in our branding, we've found that to match. But you really want to consider that, is because I think far too often when people talk about what they want to, think about what they want to discuss, they do it in a vacuum. And I think the thing you have to understand, and you guys would understand this particularly because of, the business you've been in for years, is you have to understand what is happening in the news cycle, right? Because PR is not just I know something about this thing, talk to me about this thing. It's this is what's happening in the news cycle. This is how I can take what I know and what I'm doing and bend it to the news cycle, right? You know, let's say you're a roofer in Florida and you are post hurricane and there's a lot of people trying to figure out how do you recover after a hurricane? Well, you could be the only source talking about how do you handle roofs the right way and all the ways you're getting screwed, right? So you have to think about how can I be newsworthy and how can I become the only one, right? You don't want to be the one talking about the same exact thing everybody else talks about. And I think when you're looking at being a great guest, that is really where, you know, the matchup is. And I think if you look at the way media is changing, I don't think you're going to have it. I was trying to think of what show I was listening to recently. I think it was Patrick Bet-David's show. They were talking about the statistics for who watches Fox and CNN and a lot of these channels. And he said, well, you can tell by what kind of commercials they have, right? So what type of commercials they typically have. Reverse mortgage, you know, I've fallen, I can't get up, gold.
Yeah.
So like their audience is aging, right? And that's not to be ageist in any way. It's just to talk about that the way people are consuming media is changing, right? And that the direction people are going is podcasts. You look at what happened with Trump being on the Joe Rogan show and Harris choosing not to do that same show. So there's a lot around the direction media is going. And I think when that generation that watches cable television ages out, it's going to be a very different ballgame, guys. And I think that it really is going to be on streaming, podcasts, a lot of these things. And we're kind of seeing that movement gradually now, but it's going to hit a head of steam very, very soon because I don't know about you guys. I don't have cable. I pay for certain things I want to watch. Like, for example, I pay for Gotham Sports so I can watch my Yankees games. That's about it.
Right.
Or I pay for Amazon Prime because and Paramount Plus, like things that I like and I'm going to watch. So I think once this generation changes, new media will start to become the media.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting. There's 2 points there that I thought to comment on was going back to making it relevant to the news cycle. It's so true because it makes it so much more relevant, like you said, both to the person that's hosting and to anyone who wants to listen. You might think about it a different way. Like, would I normally want to listen about the Roman Empire? I mean, I like history and all the things, but that's not what I would choose on a given day. But when
I'm the Roman Empire guy, and I'm even obsessed with and I am obsessed with the Renaissance right now. So there you go.
But when you think about, okay, I'm in a moment where I'm thinking, wow, look what's going on. We have some big things happening. What could I learn from this? What can we look through in the past? That's relevant. That makes it more interesting. That's my hook. So exactly what you're saying. And I think the other thing that's interesting about the shift in media is we'll see how all this goes. I actually don't think any of us really know because there's just so much with technology that's changing. I could see it being radically different in another 10 years. Because, you know, we went full spectrum. Everyone got rid of cable. And then we had like 1 billion streaming. We had all these different subscription services. And then people were, you know, pissed about that. And
remember years ago, people would talk about, I only want to pay for the channels I watch. You remember this? And there was like, it was a marketing campaign for a while. And it's like, now you're paying for the channels you watch. Do you like it? Right? We could go back to some sort of a combining. Now, I don't know if it'll look like cables look, but it could definitely be different. Like, I think Disney Plus is a great example of that because Disney Plus, you get Disney, you get ABC, you get ESPN, you get Hulu. So I do think there's still a lot of developing happening in this world.
I think so too. And the deals, and a lot of it's going to be who gets the content, how good is the content? Because again, that was their big hook is they get you to subscribe because there's a hit show. So that's how they're getting you. So I just think it's interesting. And a lot of like traditional, we've gotten our toes in a little bit into the entertainment space and have some friends that work in that industry. And it is like, everything's just being slaughtered and being torn down and rebuilt. And there's a lot of unknowns about the direction that's going, even just how you get things funded.
Well, I think also with digital, I think the thing that's interesting is you look at, I was reading an article a few years ago about how Netflix chooses when they do a first run of a series, if they're going to do a second run or a third or whatever it might be, and they're looking at watch times. That's what they're looking at when they're deciding if we're going to do a second series of that. Cable and things weren't looking at that, right? So I think the thing that's interesting is you don't have the big names you had anymore, right? Like you really just don't have as many known names. I was watching something recently said, maybe Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt could kind of be the last big name actors, right? Because are we really going to have that anymore?
Big movie stars.
Yeah.
Right.
So that is changing too, where we're actually playing things people are watching because they're watching them, right?
I think the point about the media world changing is important. One factor I think some people underappreciate is why somebody's listening to Joe Rogan and less interested in the 6 o'clock news. And I think part of it is we're really starving for truth. Mm-hmm. And we feel like, I certainly do, that I'm not getting it in a 2-minute story about the presidential debate. Where I am going to get it is in the 2.5 hour long episode with Joe Rogan where they go deep. I know it's not fake. I know we're getting someone's real, unfiltered opinion and discussion about a topic. And I think that's part of it. It's not just a format issue. It's not just, I don't want cable anymore. It's also, I want to go deep on some of these topics trust. Because I don't trust the news anymore.
Yeah.
And that's powerful.
I think a big part of that too, and you made a point there about listening to a long conversation. It is really hard to fake it, and unless you're a psychopath, there's some of those out there, that for a 2-hour conversation. And I think, honestly, that's one of the reasons that Kamala Harris didn't want to go on the Joe Rogan Experience, right? Because it would have shown you exactly who she is, which is a little bit terrifying. It would have shown who the real her is, and her team couldn't have that because that would have been chaos, and it would have lowered her chances of getting elected. I don't know if you guys saw the full cut of the 60 Minutes interview she did. It's pretty bad. And 60 Minutes took that interview and edited it way down because they're like, all right, well, we got to make her look good, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the real difference in podcasting is when you're doing a podcast and it's an hour, 2 hours, half hour, whatever it is, it's likely going to go out with very little editing. Television is so highly edited. People are just thirsting for humanity, and that's really what you're getting in podcasting.
The 60 Minutes settlement just was announced where they settled with Trump over their editing of it's like Harris's
30
campaign.
million or something?
16, 18 million or something. That's going to the presidential library. But what I think is interesting is when I read Politico's coverage of it, they referenced it as normal everyday edits. And I thought,
that's the problem.
Yeah. That's the problem we have with media today. They're still downplaying how protected Kamala Harris was. And look, as a political consultant, I've been there. I've had a few clients who I thought would be great elected officials, but were horrible off the cuff and horrible in an hour-long interview. They're almost guaranteed to make 10 gaffes that you're going to have to walk back. But
I'm watching an old series called Hell on Wheels right now, and it's older. It's like I think 10 years old or something. But U.S. Grant's in the series for like one episode, and he comes in and he goes, "You know why I'm going to have trouble being elected president, but I'm still going to be the next president?" He goes, "I'm a horrible alcoholic, but I'm smarter than the rest of them." Anyway.
Yes. I think we're going to see a lot more of this. I think you're absolutely right when you're talking to clients about this is the place to go and the place to be. I've also found that doing other people's shows as well as you don't get as big. If I were to get on Fox and Friends, I'd have a big deluge of coverage of whatever we were doing, and then sort of wanes. And by 3 weeks from now, the effect of it is gone. But when I do a podcast, I get leads from episodes I did 4 months ago because it took somebody 4 months to find the episode. We just had one of those with a client that came in. They were Googling the topic we were talking about that day and found our podcast and listened to the episode and called us up. So there's this sort of...
they weren't even looking for us.
Yeah. There's this sort of long tail value of doing these shows that doesn't come up immediately. You don't get on the Liberty Spenders podcast and have to triple your staff to handle the business. But 6 months from now, somebody's going to listen to you talking about Roman history and say, this is a guy I need to be on my team.
I think something to consider too is also understanding that just the nature of all the information we have available now, the modern buyer has changed. And I'm sure being people that watch spending, you've seen this, but the modern buyer has changed. They're a much more educated buyer, and they don't believe a lot of the hokey marketing messages that people used to use, right? except that cars for kids thing, man. It is never coming out of my head. It is kind of wedged in an area that I don't even know what to say. But anyway, you have to understand that first and foremost, you are an information and education company. Every company is. And that's the direction we've been in. If you are not educating your public, if you are not teaching, you're going to be left behind as a brand, because the modern consumer is really smart. And if you even look at statistics on, who watches podcasts, typically their income is close to $100,000. They're likely, they've done some college education, if not all of their college education. So you have to understand that these are people making decisions based on information. So you need to be the one providing it, not waiting for somebody else to provide it. Because I'll tell you right now, if you're waiting for someone else to provide it, even if it's not true, it's likely going to be the worst thing about you, right? And I think that's what you really have to understand when you are an information company first.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll add to that, because this is something we preach a lot when we're sharing people about leaning into their values and your convictions, because not only are people doing information ahead of time, right, but they're deciding whether or not they think they like you, and so before, when somebody would call up a company and then you have to walk them through this like sales script, et cetera, if you're doing things right, people that are coming to you are almost pre-sold, right? They've already done the research. They've read the case study. They've looked at the stuff. They've heard you talk, maybe bought a book or some kind of a download. And so having podcasts and other appearances and other materials, like you said, to educate people, it's good for them to know you're a subject matter expert, but they can get to feel like they know you, trust you. And to what we were talking about before, I just trust in big businesses down, any institution. And so I think the more you can be authentic too in how you do it, show your personality, let people know who you are, why you do what you do. It's just going to attract people that much more, because they feel like they understand who you are at your core.
Yeah.
And I think as well, with all the AI and other things out there, the more human you can be, the more it's going to help you. I know when I'm getting one of those robocalls, because it always goes bloop, bloop when I pick up the phone, so I know where it came from. So I think those marketing methods, sure, you can put them out in a wide net and it's going to get a return, right? But I think if, as a brand, the more human you can be and the more you can communicate and the more personable you can be, the more you're going to benefit, because you are going to be able to stay ahead of a lot of these technology trends.
Yeah. Well, and it cuts through the noise, right? Signal versus noise. It's like, is this even real? Who made this? Oh, no. I feel like this is the real person telling me, and getting a sense for who they are.
Yeah.
Although I don't know, tech's getting pretty good, where it'll be hard to distinguish.
Yeah. Well, this has been awesome. And I wanted to, as we kind of wind down, we do our special lightning round with every guest. And, we like to do 3 questions, maybe 90 seconds each, although there's no buzzer. So the accountability is pretty low. And the first question we like to dig deep with somebody on is, what kind of legacy are you looking to leave behind from your work, perhaps at Command Your Brand or with your show? What legacy are you after? Well,
if you look at major things in history that were spoken, right? So, December 7th, 1941, a day that will live in infamy, or one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Those are things that stick with us. Those are iconic messages. So for me, I can only do so much as a person. But as a brand and as a company, I can support people that have those messages, that want to leave that legacy, that want to have those lines or thoughts or ideas that can be remembered. So that's really what I'm about, is how can I help people that want to leave a big legacy, leave a bigger one? Because I think that's how we fix this crazy place we live in called Earth. And I think it's how we really, make a better place for our children in the future.
All right. Next one, 90 seconds. What's something that's fascinating you recently that we haven't talked about yet? Maybe it's a hobby. Maybe you're into a new thing. What's something that's captured your attention?
I don't know, man. I'm a nerd. So like right now, I've went through a bunch of audiobooks this week and a bunch of series and stuff on TV. I'm literally stuck on the Renaissance because I just find it to be one of the most interesting time periods, on Earth. If you want to look at it, most of the art you appreciate from the Renaissance exists because of one city and one family, and that's the Medici in Florence. They were the ones paying for a lot of the art. They were the ones because you couldn't be an artist if you didn't have somebody that was basically sponsoring you. So I think that's very interesting. He's a little bit crazy, but to me, one of the most interesting characters in history is Cesare Borgia. Cesare Borgia is the son of the illegitimate son of Pope Alexander VI. He was the first cardinal to decide he didn't want to be a cardinal anymore, and he became what's called a condottiere, which is basically a military commander for hire. And he conquers the entire Romagna, which is the area of Italy where Florence is. And he has this giant plan that he wants to unite Italy, because Italy was all these little city-states. And this is in the late 1400s, early 1500s. It's going to take 300 years so that later happens under Garibaldi. But this guy literally almost did it. It's the fact that he gets syphilis at a time that is rather inconvenient for him. That kind of ends his ability to be who he was. But Machiavelli's Prince, most of the book is actually based on Borgia and a lot of what he did right and didn't do right in his life. And Machiavelli says about Borgia that he's the perfect prince, but he was not prepared for his own illness and the illness and death of his father, the Pope, because most of his power came from the papal army at that point in time. So I'm kind of obsessed with that time period at the moment.
There you go.
Well, Renaissance art. Now we got something you and I can talk about. That's more my lane, buddy.
Florence. Have you been to Florence?
I've been to Florence a number of times, and actually my 10th wedding anniversary is coming up in September. So
congratulations.
Thank you. I have gotten my mother-in-law to agree to watch our 3 daughters for us for a week, and I've gotten my wife to agree to do the battle map of Cesare Borgia across the Romagna, which should be fun.
Wow, that's
It's like, well, I get to go to Italy, so what do I care?
Yeah.
Right. She's like, sign me up. It's fine.
Yes, Florence was great.
Oh,
it's one of our best trips.
That was
taken.
Great. It's funny because it's the city of Dante, but he wasn't even buried there. He gets kicked out of the city and he's buried at Ravenna, and they actually move his body much later on. But it's a really, really cool place.
Yeah. Yeah. We just loved walking around at night there. There was always something going on, and it felt safe, and so many cool things. And of course, I love me some good gelato.
They also have a history of, funny enough, like kicking out their most successful people, right? Like they kicked Machiavelli out of the city, they kicked Petrarch out of the city, they kicked Dante out of the city. So it's really kind of an interesting political scene. The more you learn about it,
absolutely. Well, last thing we like to do is, if somebody only watches 90 seconds of the episode, this is an opportunity. Give us 90 seconds. Why would somebody work with you and your company? Who should be working with you? Who should be looking for you, and why should they work with you?
So we typically work with the CEO or founder of a company because they really have the brand story. And when you look at, what people are interested in podcasts, it's your story, how it can help them, and how they can really buy into that story. So for us, we're really helping your story to impact more people and to change lives. That's what we're looking to do. So I think we're really looking for founders that understand that telling their story isn't up to someone else, it's up to them. So that's what we're really all about. We're about helping you tell your story to the right people at the right time in the right way. And that's how you build a legacy, and that's how you get remembered. And that is how a brand goes from, this level of stagnancy, or the kind of this growth plateau, to this next level of growth where people know about you, what you do, and you don't have to explain your brand to others anymore. They come and find you, and they're educated about your brand and understand your brand. So that's really who we're looking to work with, is people that want to build an empire, not see theirs decline and fall, and to really leave a legacy.
Nice.
Yes, nice. Well, this has been really great, and I'm really glad you came on, and we hit a couple of really awesome and interesting topics. And for those of you who want to learn more about Jeremy, or maybe get in contact with him, you can hit him up at www.jeremyryanslate.com.
Yes, Jeremy, thanks for joining. I have a lot to, sounds like, dig into more with this Renaissance and Dante. I'm going to have to look at some of that stuff you pointed out. So thanks very much for joining. And for those of you tuning in, we appreciate your time and attention. If you found value in this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss anything in the future. And we invite you to learn more and get access to our new best-selling book at libertyspenders.com/free. Until next time.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Liberty Spenders Podcast. If you're a business owner, We hope today's conversation gave you valuable insights on how to grow your business.
If you enjoyed the show, do us a favor. Hit like, subscribe, and leave a 5-star review. It really helps us reach more entrepreneurs and leaders like you who are ready to make an impact.
And write something flattering, because I read them all. Don't forget to grab your copy of Liberty Spenders too, available now on Amazon and at libertyspenders.com. It's packed with proven strategies to help you reach the 76.5 million consumers who are looking for brands that share their values.
We'll see you next time as we continue exploring how to grow your business with purpose and conviction.
Thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next episode and the one after that.